a few years ago, when I started to get into personal development, everything like that, I would hear gurus on stage say, you can have everything you want. You can have it all. Da, da, da. And I was like, yeah, okay, easy for you to say. You don't know what I've been through. But after I started to learn the science behind manifestation and the universal laws and everything like that, it became solid proof for me, like, oh, I can actually have what it is that I want.
All eyes on me, I shine with everything I do. All eyes on me, yeah, I'll do me and you do you.
This is the Bold Bitch podcast, where I dive deep into conversations around taboo topics. I'm your gay, ADHD having, and compulsively curious host, Gia Goodrich, and among many things, I have a very low tolerance for bullshit. So each week, I have intriguing conversations with experts, tastemakers, rebels, and rule breakers who choose to boldly own their opinion and show up in this crazy call-out culture we live in. Because speaking your mind and trusting your gut isn't easy, but the boldest, truest version of yourself is exactly what the world needs. Woo! Timing is not my jam today. Hello, hi, hey, how are yas? I am so excited for this episode. You know, like when you have people that you followed online for a couple years, like on social media, and you just from afar, they dazzle you, they surprise you, you love them, you develop a connection, even though you realize, bitch, you don't actually know them in real life, although you experience and feel this deep connection. That is the story with our guest today. She has just so inspired me over the years of seeing her content. And it's just been so amazing in watching the growth and trajectory of what she's done and really reminding me what it looks like when somebody really lives into the fullness of who they are. And of course, I've been thinking and talking about that a lot, especially on TikTok, because I've been going live a lot on TikTok. And so I've been having this real-time interaction with people, and I just keep getting this continual affirmation of I'm not enough, I have imposter syndrome, what people would think about me, just this continual messages of not enoughness and worried about the way that we're showing up in the world. And I resonate, right? Because I'm just as insecure as everybody else. But really thinking about, okay, what are the questions we can ask ourselves to really start to unpack, unravel what it is that we're thinking and doing and how we're showing up? Really thinking about me feeling this way, who does it actually serve? Does it serve me? Does it serve the patriarchy? Does it serve these impressive systems when I'm not living into the fullness of who I am? You betcha. And thinking about just asking questions that can create that space. What does it look like? What might it look like? What could I do? How would it be? How would it feel if I did this? And convincing yourself. Well, it's not even convincing yourself. It's just honoring the fact that there are a multiplicity of options that are available to us. There are so many ways that we can see the world differently. There are so many stories we can have about who we are and what we're capable of that can either serve us or be deeply traumatizing. And just asking what if those weren't my stories? How would I show up? What if I wasn't scared? What if I knew I couldn't fail? All of these things. And really thinking about the way that this guest shows up and really helps people unwind a lot of that is just so, so, so powerful. I want to get into the episode, but really quickly, I have to say, I am so excited. Thank you for holding me accountable. I am getting ready to launch my magnetic and virtual meetings course. By the time this airs, you will have a few days left to register. If it seems like it's your jam, just go to magneticandvirtualmeetings.com. Yes, I got the URL because yes, I'm a bold bitch. And we're going to get started. It's a live cohort starting July 15th. And I'm just so excited for this community to teach you all the things and to have people just show up, level up, and lean into the fullness of who they are and radiate with that fabulosity and sparkatality. Yeah, you can tell. It's happening. It's crystallizing. It's a thing. And I'm so excited. Let's roll into the episode. Today's guest, energetically, is a gravitational force for good. Her work as a mindset and abundance coach has impacted hundreds of thousands of humans by revealing the power of their subconscious mind and giving them techniques to reframe their map of the world to one which aligns with their greatest potential. I've been following her on Instagram for years, and I can tell you everything about her radiates with love, presence, generosity, and abundance. So much so that you might assume she was born with it or assume she was born into it. But she, like so many of us, came from a single mom working to do her best, but living in an abusive relationship, financial instability, and fear. So Reese had all the same limiting beliefs, negative self-talk, and self-sabotaging patterns that we all struggle with. However, she alchemized those experiences and learned the power of modalities like neuro-linguistic programming, hypnotherapy, emotional freedom technique or tapping, and energy work to create her formula for long-lasting transformation. She's manifested a multi-million-dollar business by sharing the Yes Supply method with the world. And she currently has hundreds of method certified coaches around the globe that empower people to release everything that holds them back and create quantum leaps in their life. The deeply inspiring, gorgeous energy having, and splendiferously bold bitch, Reese Evans.
Hi, Gia. Woo! Thank you so much for having me here. And I am going to listen to that intro over and over and over again. Your voice is amazing and you're just so kind. Thank you.
You are so welcome. And it's interesting because I've followed you for a long time. It's one of those things where it feels like there's no way a human can be like so prolific and just constantly generating this stuff that is so resonant. You know what I mean? Like usually it's like kind of hit or miss and things like that. But with you, like it feels like on some level, anything that it's like, oh, I kind of need a hit of this that I'm not even consciously aware of. I'm like, oh, Reese has got a video about it. Let's tap on it.
Thank you so much. I feel like a big part of that is I've allowed myself a lot of the time, not all the time, not perfect, but just to be in a state of channeling. Like a lot of the time I'll say something where I'm like, I didn't even know I knew that, or where did that come from? But I feel like there's something bigger than me that knows that I'm willing to be a channel. I'm willing to just share, what comes through. And so a lot comes through. Sometimes so much comes through that it's like overwhelming and I don't know, what platform to talk about it. We were just talking about maybe I'll start a podcast in a few months. But yeah, I think it's just like not resisting and just trusting that if the message came to you, it's supposed to come through you. There's something greater than us that I think puts us on this path to share our message. And that's why it hits home for the people who we're meant to inspire.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about that because so much of what's embedded in what you just said and a lot of your methodology is this idea of trust, right? And the greatest good for all, and not really holding tight ferociously to the way we think things should go and just like being clear about what you want, but then also releasing. So how do you frame that for yourself and create that guide to help you keep coming back to that frame when our tendency is to want to control outcomes of things?
100%. I think that need to control, or that desire to control, comes from ego, and it comes from wanting to protect ourselves or look a certain way or look perfect or have people adore us and not make a mistake, perfectionism, all of that. That comes from selfishness, as nice as, or as not nice as it is to say, it comes from selfishness. How am I going to look? What will people think of me if I say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing? Da, 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 da. Or I get this question a lot from coaches. What if I share too much and then they don't need to hire me anymore? Or they don't want to buy my course anymore? When we drop the ego, then we remember that it's not even about the person listening buying your course, or it's not even about the person listening liking you or not liking you because of what you said or didn't say. I think that if you want to become a coach, you become a coach not because you want people to like you. You do it because you like people. And so you're there to just share what you think is in the best interest of the collective. And so sometimes I'll share something very vulnerably, it's a tough word. And it might not come across as perfect, but I have a feeling that somebody who's going through a similar thing needs to hear it. And so that's why I do it. This year, too, I dove deep into learning more about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Actually, it's so funny. I literally popped out of a conference that's happening right now with Trudy LeBron to be on this podcast, and I'm going to pop back in after. And I'm also learning that a lot of the reasons why we're trying to protect ourselves or be, quote, perfect, everything like that, professional, is because of the fact that we live in a white supremacist system.
Absolutely.
And all of these systems have been put in place to make us think that we have to look a certain way and be a certain size and show up in a certain way and talk in a certain way in order to be successful. I know for a long time when I heard the word CEO, I thought of an old white man, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of what's been just programmed. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot about programming as we get into mindset later in the podcast. But yeah, I feel like learning that as well, like, oh, professionalism and sense of urgency and perfectionism, that's white supremacy.
Right.
And that's been programmed in me from every movie and news article and everything that I've seen growing up. I think that when we're trying to be something that we're not to fit into that professional or whatever box, it's because of the programming that we've got from these systems for decades.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and it's interesting in thinking about the lack of representation growing up, also how we relate that to our identity and what we internalize, like the stories we internalize by that absence. And I'm curious for you, because for me, it's been so much in even beginning to unpack that because it's so swimming beneath my awareness. Like, it never even once crossed my mind that I would be a doctor or a surgeon or anything like that. Sure, I probably, would not love that lifestyle because biology was not my jam. But there were things it wasn't even a part of my awareness because I had so internalized people who look like you exist here. So what were those like in relationship to your identity? What were those stories for you growing up that have now you've shed?
I think there's so many, but a big one that comes to mind for me right now is very much what you're saying about the career that you chose. I actually thought I was going to be a nurse. I took like biology and chemistry and all this stuff in high school, and I sucked at it. I sucked at it so bad. And if you looked at any of my notebooks or journals, I was just doodling them. I used to be a really, really great drawer, but I had the idea stuck in my head that if you're creative, you're not going to be able to make money. You're not going to be able to survive. And especially growing up in a situation where, like, for me, there was no plan B. Like, my mom's a wonderful person, but if I, messed up and didn't get the right career, she was not going to be the one paying my bills for me. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I was like, I need to go after the secure thing. And so I essentially shed the things that were really me, the things that I was interested in, being creative, everything like that. Because I'm like, okay, I need science and math and to do this thing in order to be successful, because that's what I thought success was. And now it turned out, now I'm doing something where I feel like I'm really just using my creativity, more of a creativity of words and language and emotions now more than art. But I feel like I'm fulfilling my purpose and able to be creative and expressive. And, when I was in high school, I didn't think that was possible for me. Another big thing too is even just like creating success or creating a platform where, I'm visible to a lot of people. Growing up, when I would watch TV, the main character, the popular girl, would always be the white girl, right? We don't even realize how these messages in TVs and movies make us feel like, okay, there's certain characters that fit into a certain place. And so because of who I am and how I look, I have to be like the sidekick, right? I have to be the extra in the background. Right. I can't have that main character energy. I feel like everyone's talking about main character energy right now. I can't have the main character energy because of what I look like. And when I, was starting to discover the personal development world and started to discover coaching, I felt the same way. I was like, there's no woman of color that look like me. There's no one that I know of that lived in an abusive home like me. And so for a minute, or longer than a minute, but for a while, I thought, well, I can't be successful because there's no one like me who's doing it. And then I realized maybe that role model doesn't exist yet because I'm supposed to be that role model. And maybe I'm not the only person who, has seen so many, like, nothing against, white people or white coaches. I have lots of like white friends and everything like that. But it's like, maybe everyone has seen so much of the same thing. They're ready for something different now. And maybe I actually can fit in and do my thing and people are excited for it. And the beautiful thing is now I have so many people of color reach out to me and say, thank you for showing up. And thank you for showing that you've created the business of your dreams or helped a lot of people or created a platform, because you are exactly what I needed to see. And I created what I needed to see a few years ago. And so I feel like this is such a big reminder to all of us that if you don't fit into the typical size, if you're neurodiverse or have a different level of ability, or a lot of people ask me, like, can I be successful even though I have an accent? And I'm like, of course, like,
Yeah.
of course, of course, of course. My husband and I, we watched a movie called Yes Day a few days ago. And I love that. Well, the main character was Jennifer Garner, but her husband in the movie was, I think he was Spanish and he had an accent. And I was like, I love that finally, like, we're seeing a main character who, you know, isn't just like the white dude, right?
Right.
That was inspiring for me. I'm sure that was inspiring for so many people who are English speaking but have an accent. Going back to what I was saying, I think that we need to look at the things that are different and remind ourselves that the world wants different right now. Like, people want different, people need to see it. And yes, it's the responsibility of the systems to change and support us. But I also feel like it's our responsibility to start to take up that space and, you know, ask for that support, or be in that place and see ourselves as that leader, so that, you know, we can kind of work together in breaking down these older systems.
Absolutely. And that's so much of what I feel called to talk about, is that idea of bigness and boldness and really having the audacity to show up fully as yourself. Regardless of who the human is, we all have these stories and layers of things that are just put on top of us that we internalize, these scripts that we don't know are running. It takes courage every day to listen to that internal knowing and say, okay, I'm going to do this thing. And one of the things that I think for me, and I'm sure for everybody who is a part of the Yes Apply method and has received wonderful coaching through it, is that kind of ability to recognize that as important information and then act on it, because you're not then being continually blocked by these stories that come flooding in. So let's talk about some of that, because the different modalities that you leverage they're like very emotionally charged. I've been familiar with NLP for a while, but I just randomly was like, let me just YouTube it. Like, the fifth search result that comes up is about like how to read people's minds and how to manipulate the situation. And I'm like, interesting. So how did you figure out what really had that kind of impact that you were looking for?
Yeah, so it's so interesting about that, because NLP can be used to manipulate people's minds. NLP can be used in a very bad way. And that's why I felt a duty to teach it in the way that I do, because without the majority of the population knowing it, NLP and hypnosis, conversational hypnosis, is being used on us every single day. Every time you turn on the screen, the news is hypnotizing you, politicians are hypnotizing you. Like, I'll watch debates, and because I know this stuff, I'm watching like, oh, okay, they just did that, they just did that, they just did that. They know how to manipulate the way that they talk to have people think a certain thing or feel a certain way. Or the one that I'm seeing a lot, especially lately, because I'm in Ontario and lockdowns have been going on for a year, and our politicians are really good at talking for 3 minutes without saying anything. So the reporter will be like, okay, so, you know, what's the percentage of, you know, cases that have to go down, this and that, before, you know, Ontario gets reopened? They're like, well, we are logistically reviewing the statistics of the strategy. And it's like 3 minutes later, the reporter is like, I think he answered my question, but they actually said nothing in a really great way.
I love that.
So it can be used against you for sales, for, you know, politics, for fear mongering news, all of that. And just like a butter knife, like you could use a knife to hurt someone, or you could use a knife to make an avocado toast.
Mm-hmm.
I use the tools to help unprogram people from the programming that isn't serving them, and then help program them with the empowering way that they want to feel. And that's what we're teaching our coaches, because like we talked about before, we've been manipulated from the media to think that, okay, you can only be beautiful or successful if you look like this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's bad to have money. So like, don't make yourself financially secure. Like, no, like that would make you really bad. Like just stay little and stay small so that you're easy to control, right? And so we've been manipulated in all those ways. And so what happens when you know this work is you can start to understand, oh, I've been programmed to believe that I'm not lovable. I've been important to believe that I have to work hard or be perfect in order to be important or be successful. And we're able to unprogram those things and then look at, okay, what kind of programs would support me in creating the life that I want? So maybe believing that you are worthy of having money, or believing that you are worthy of showing up and sharing your message and sharing your story, starting the podcast or whatever it is. And we use these tools to program them in. So that person on YouTube, they were not lying, but what you want to do if you learn these tools is, and I'm sure everyone who's listening to your podcast is this type of person, you want to use them ethically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think to your point, like having something that is so effective that it can be used to negative ends really also validates how powerful it can be in leveraging for something that you're really excited about. Because there have just been, I mean, myself included, where there's this, I think, desire to consume, right? So like my Audible is like 100% just like self-betterment, hustle culture, like just, all this kind of stuff, even into like Abraham Hicks world. And right. So, but it's all like, how can we be better, faster, stronger, nicer, kinder? Like, let's do that. But I think what happens for a lot of us is we're so in this like intake mode that the application of it becomes something that is blocked because we're still operating with an operating system that is still programmed for all this kind of gunk. So I'm curious for you, now having experienced like thousands and thousands of people's stories and abilities to self-sabotage, what are the big patterns that you see in how we self-sabotage that are just like, ubiquitous, I guess?
There's so many. The one that's coming to mind for me right now is, what will they think? What will they think if I start the business? What will they think if I tell this story? What will they think if I dress the way I really want instead of being the person I always have been? I would say that is such a big kind of indicator that someone is self-sabotaging, because they know exactly what they want to do, and then they're not doing it or being it or having it because what will they think? Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting because in certain situations, if I'm, working with someone one-on-one and I hear the question, what will they think? I'll ask, who is they? And it's so interesting because so often we're like, what will they think? And it seems like this big, group of people. And then I had a client once who was like, well, like I haven't shown up on social media. So once I start again, they're going to be mad that I hadn't shown up in a few months. And I was like, who's going to be mad? And she's like, oh, well, like the people that like have followed me for a while. I'm like, well, which ones specifically? And like, it's so funny because we put ourselves in this like state, this trance of like, oh, I can't do this because of this reason. And then we realize like, oh, they probably wouldn't actually be mad. They'd probably be happy that I started posting again if they like my content, right?
They're like, come on, Mitch, we're ready for you.
Exactly. Or someone who was like, people from high school, like, what will they think now that I'm starting a business? Because in high school, I was the funny one or the party one. Okay, who specifically from high school? Oh, that person. Oh, I actually don't really care what they think, And so I think that just thinking like, what will other people think, can be such a huge place of self-sabotage, of just not going after what we want. And essentially like, my company's all about yesify, like saying yes to yourself. And so when you're telling yourself, what will they think? You're automatically saying no. You're automatically saying, oh, they're going to judge me. They're going to laugh at me. They're not going to like me. They're going to unfollow me. They're going to not buy my stuff. So you're instantly telling yourself no before anyone else has ever told you no. And with a mindset shift, you could just say, well, what if they think it's inspiring? What if they think it's actually a good thing? What if they think that my content is great or empowering or whatever? I definitely had the thought, what will they think about, people in high school? And it's so interesting because there's this amazing woman who went to high school with me, and she went through my first level coach training and just recently went through my second level coach training, and was shouting from the rooftops on Instagram of how great the certification was, right? So imagine I didn't go after what I wanted because what will people think from high school? Guess what? People from high school are signing up. And I also had the same thought as I used to work in retail, and there's a lot of like cool girls at that retail store, and had that thought. And someone who used to be my manager actually used to work on my team. And someone who I worked with at one of the stores is currently on my team and is an amazing person on our team. So again, it's like we can have these conceptions in our mind of like, oh, people won't support or gossip and that, but give people the benefit of the doubt, because they might actually end up working with you or end up signing up for your course or, being your biggest supporter on your social media. You never know until you try.
Yes. Well, and that is such a big thing that I hear come up, because a lot of what I end up doing is helping people figure out how to really show up boldly when it comes to these different places, right? So on social media or in video and things like that. And the thing that I hear so much is that exact thing, like, oh my gosh, people are going to think I'm narcissistic. It's all about me if I put my face up there and all of this stuff. And I totally had a similar thought, when you're starting a baby like YouTube channel and you have 4 subscribers, it's like everybody's going to think like, who does this bitch think she is, and it's awkward and weird and vulnerable. But then at some point, so this is the thing, like if I'm really being true to myself, and I'm curious if it's the same for you, that feeling never fully goes away for me, right? What happens is I just do it anyways because I know the impact is what I want to have, right? But there is always like this little bit of like, oh, my face is everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like for me, the story of what will they think changed. Like now I'm obviously not afraid to show up online or whatever, but kind of like the reasoning behind it or the story behind it kind of changes. So like, I know for me, like I said, this year we've been on a big journey in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion. And so because I'm still learning so much and I know that there's so much that I don't know, there's part of me who is like, yeah, I want to share on what I'm learning and I want to inspire others to dive deep into this work. And I want to share like all the good things, like, for years I've been donating to charities and everything like that. I want to share that to inspire other people to give back and see ways that they can support others. So there's that. But then there's that other little voice in your head or in my head that's like, well, kind of like, look at me, like I donated to this charity, like I know that, you know what I mean?
I'm giving so much right now.
Yeah, right? And so it's like, I've given to charities for years, even before diving into this, but now I'm starting to realize that like the more we talk about it, the more we can inspire others. But then there's that little voice in my head that's like, oh, you think you're so good because you know what I mean? So that's actually something that I'm working through. And also, too, I want to continue to learn before I start teaching on it because, there is still so much that I don't know. And creating, diverse and equitable and inclusive business is, yes, about race, but it's also about supporting people who need different levels of accessibility, neurodiversity, everything like that. And so right now, I know that there's so much more that we can do that we are currently working on to truly say that, because I just personally don't feel like I can say, yes, we're a diverse company, even though we have people of all different races sign up. And we actually just sent out a survey earlier today. I don't know what our group is of people who are neurodiverse or, have the neurodiversity, have different levels of accessibility. And so, you want to support others and you don't want to be like, oh, look at me. And then you want to be really in integrity when you do that. So that's something that I'm like honestly working through right now.
I love that. And one of the things I noticed with your website, which is really, I think, the first time I've ever seen that, is an accessibility menu, which is so cool because I'm one of those neurodivergent folks. Actually, some of the biggest fighting that's ever happened in my family, like ever, comes down to lighting. And it's like, so it sounds so ridiculous, but I've now learned, and as a kid, we didn't know why, but and I'm a photographer, so lighting is my superpower now. But if I'm in an area where there's a big shift in light, so like the perfect example is you're watching a TV in a dark living room, like that it hurts my brain so much that I can't sit in it. But for everybody else, it's like, well, you're being a diva, And so it's interesting now, this place that we're in, where we're really understanding there's a lot of diversity in terms of processing sensory information, and there's in terms of language and all of these things. And so, yeah, that was something that was very cool that I saw, that I want to apply with my own website, but then also just something I'm excited to see as a trend is just thinking about the experiences from a viewpoint that is maybe different from yours.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad to hear more of your story and what you've gone through. And I can only imagine how this must feel when you're saying, this is hard for me. This is hard for me to like focus right now or learn or, watch the screen in this lighting. And everyone's like, oh, like, you're fine. Stop complaining. And I think that that's what this work of inclusion is all about. Like, we can't say that we're inclusive unless we actually take the time to listen to different people's experiences, because there's so much that we don't know. I've always kind of been someone who, I like the phrase, like, don't talk about it, be about it. So like, it's like, yeah, I want to put that thing on our website before I start talking about how great I am, that I'm so diverse, but you know what I mean? So I want to do that. Or even like, I'm sure you've noticed on our website too, there are so many different faces, and, certain things are invisible, so you would never be able to see it through a picture. But yeah, I want to make sure that I'm actually being about it before I start talking about it. And just finding that balance of, I live to inspire and support others. So it's finding that balance of, let me really make sure that I am being it. And I feel like I'm being it through and through before I start saying that,
Right. I'm a big deal. Well, which is also like, I think a part of the thing that I'm personally trying to train myself in is like, okay, but let's also honor the fullness and badassery that we are showing up to the table with, right? Where it's like, yes, I am a student of many things, of arguably all things, and I'm doing my best, and I will inevitably fuck up royally. And yet I'm still like pretty fucking awesome. And like, these are the things that I'm doing over here. And especially women, minorities, people in gender and sexuality, different places. I feel like there is that socialization where the default isn't to say, like, introduce yourself with your first and your last name and say what you do with authority. Like, even that is like such a like, well, yeah, everybody should feel compelled to do it. But it's interesting. I just got back from a retreat. It was amazing, like 15 women, all rock stars, just wonderfully empowered people. And we went around and everybody just said their first name, which is totally fine, except you never see that in a group of men, right?
Right.
It's always like, I'm so-and-so, I'm a CEO of this or whatever. And there is something subtle and powerful about just even little things like that, the type of disparity it continues to perpetuate.
I know. I feel like for women, we've been so programmed to like, I'm just going to be humble. I'm just going to be over here. I don't want to piss anyone off with my greatness and my brightness. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Absolutely. So, okay. So I am really curious if you're willing to go there. If you could share like a story about like, you're on this journey already. You've like gone through so much stuff. You have all the tools, you have all this stuff. Like, could you share a story that like, you're like, I'm really together, and yet I'm finding myself spinning out about this thing and having this crazy reaction, and just like those moments that like snap you back to your old patterning that you then work through?
I became a mom in August 2020, showing up, doing my best, breastfeeding, balancing my team, balancing, our new trainers who are leading the team, balancing clients, everything like that. And I had someone who I knew reach out to me and essentially let me know that because I shared that I had a very positive birth experience. My birth experience for me was great. I used hypnosis. It was very short. It was beautiful. And I was really happy about it. I didn't think that I shared from like a gloating place or anything like that. I thought I was just letting people know that it was possible, because I know for me, months leading up to giving birth, I was watching all the YouTube positive birth stories because I was working through my own fears of giving birth. And I was so grateful to everyone who showed me examples of positive birth experiences, show me that was possible.
Yeah, because I feel like you always get this kind of fear mongering about that experience in particular, where people
Yeah,
just like show up with these horror stories and like prime you to be scared and having this like super horrendous experience.
exactly. Even in movies, I've seen movies since then that it's like the woman's on the table, like screaming. And I understand different people have different backgrounds, different medical experiences. And for a lot of people, it's not a great experience. And I send all my love to them. But there's also so much fear, like in movies, where it's like every single situation you see of a woman giving birth is her just essentially sending us the message that like our bodies can't do it. Long story short, I guess I just mentioned it on Instagram or something like that, that I had had a positive birth experience. And someone reached out to me who I knew and told me that by me saying that I had manifested a positive birth experience, I was essentially saying that she had manifested her bad birth experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that put me into such an old pattern, especially having just given birth and dealing with hormones and everything like that, that put me like into like in a time where I wanted to just be experiencing bliss and connection and everything like that. It put me in a place where I felt like I couldn't, like, my voice isn't important, or if I say anything, just being me, like, it's not safe for me to be me because me talking about my life could hurt somebody. I think that it probably brought me back to when I was living in an abusive house, and every single thing that I said or did, like, I was always walking on eggshells, and like I wasn't allowed to express myself or be myself, or I would get in trouble for like leaving a cereal box open 3 weeks ago, and it would, come up again and be a 6 hour fight. So it definitely sent me into an old pattern of like, well, it's not safe to talk, it's not safe to share, it's not safe to celebrate, because me celebrating means that people are going to be angry at me or, send negativity my way.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really hard.
Yeah, and I can imagine it creates this kind of like sucking in feeling where it's like, okay, I need to like contain everything, which
Yeah.
is magnified by the visibility factor, you know? Yeah, that sounds hard. Okay, so like in that moment when you're feeling yourself like this is happening, what are the steps that you utilize to really say, okay, like we're going to take this on, or we're going to get to a place like now where you can like acknowledge it, it's not emotionally activating you, and you can use it as like a teaching moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So like in that moment, as soon as I heard that, I definitely said, like, I'm obviously not apologizing for my great birth experience or my healthy son. I didn't say that to that person, but,
Right.
just knowing. But to that person, I said, like, I apologize that hearing what I shared made you feel that way. That was definitely not my intention. I'm sorry that you had a tough, birth experience. And I think that if you say something that hurts someone, I think that it is a good idea to try to reach out and, listen to them and help them be heard and everything like that. And, it kind of put me in a tough situation because my whole life is working hard. Like, it's not like the birth experience just happened. I read a ton of books. I spent hours watching videos. I hired a birth doula. I had people come into my home, like even during COVID, and give me like come in with the dolls and everything like that and give me training. So I did put in a lot of time and effort, not saying that anyone else who puts in the time and effort, whatever, if they had a bad experience, not like, I'm not trying to say that, you have to work hard to get it, or someone who worked hard who didn't have it doesn't deserve it or anything like that. I'm just sharing my personal experience.
Yeah, and that it didn't happen by happenstance, that you were very intentionally working toward this as a potential outcome.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And like that's like everything I do in my life. Like when I started my business, I struggled. I had limiting beliefs. I had people who didn't believe in me, whatever. And I overcame that. And I got to a point where I can stop and say, hey, I struggled with this and I overcame it. And here's how I did it. And so that put me in such a interesting situation because all I know is how to work towards something. And then, you know, if it doesn't go well, keep working on it. And if it does go well, try to help others, try to inspire others. And so it did put me in a weird situation where I felt like, can I inspire others? You know, like if I'm inspiring people, am I going to upset people?
But here's the thing that's interesting about that is I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think you can upset someone and also inspire them to change because of that emotional activation of it touching a nerve with them, you know? And I'm curious about, sorry to just like totally interrupt you. That's like,
no, not at all. No, not at all.
Okay.
This is your world. I'm just living in it.
I'm not saying, the thing that I'm curious about, and when it comes to manifestation, like taking the emotions out of it, and let's just assume everything happens for the highest good for all. Do you believe that everybody manifests their experiences, whether it's consciously or unconsciously? Because to me, when I hear her point, I would say, well, that's true, right? Like, I don't know what was factoring in. I don't know what's factoring into your particular situation, but I believe that everybody is actively creating what happens to them. And sometimes we get shitty experiences that we don't like, but they usually end up serving us in some way or becoming a fabric of our being that we take forward with us. To me, that statement, even though like, yes, it sucks and everything, it reads as true.
That has so many nuances, so many nuances, because I believe that we have our individual consciousness where we create our reality. But then I also believe that there's a collective consciousness that's creating this collective reality, right? And so, for example, if we look at, centuries of history of, white supremacy, for example, because we were talking about that before, and then we look at racism in our world, the person who gets pulled over and hurt just because they were driving and Black, I don't think that just because they were driving a car innocently, they deserve to, like they created that. They just happened to be driving to the, I don't know, I was going to say like movie rental store, but do those even exist? I don't know.
That's a great question.
I think there's like one, right? Because we watched the Blockbuster thing a few weeks ago. So I think that collective consciousness can create that. And I also think that in some situations too, either our personal consciousness or even a consciousness from generations can create situations. And this typically happens for one-off situations. I feel like when a one-off situation happens, like something really, you're hurt as a child and there's no way that you could have created that. I feel like a lot of the time that could be generational or collective that created that. But where I feel like we do have the power is if, 30 years later, we're allowing something that happened to us a long time ago to hold us back, or rather than moving forward from it. For me, what I went through was obviously very, very hard and very, very tough. And I was afraid to start to share my story. And also because part of my story is my mom's story, I was afraid to share it because now I'm exposing her and my little brother and everything like that. And I had a conversation with her and I said to her, I feel like if we went through everything we went through and we do nothing with our story rather than trying to help someone, then we kind of went through all of it for pain and suffering, but nothing positive. But if we have gone through this and we're able to maybe change one person's life or help them look at the world differently, then maybe it all happened for something. So I do believe that there's nuances with everything. There's the collective conscious experience and our singular consciousness. But where I do think that we can have control, even if in the past we weren't conscious, we were too young to control the situation, whatever, in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, upwards, whatever, we can say, okay, but can I take something from this that makes me stronger? And can I stop the patterns? Can I break the old patterns and step into a new pattern or identity that will actually serve me and the future generations to come. I think all the online conversations that are happening right now as well are helping to break so many patterns that are not supporting people or oppressive, and help to create like a new world.
See, and that's a really interesting distinction because I think for me, and maybe it's just a story I tell myself, but I think about the experiences that I've brought into my awareness, right? That have become a part of like my life story. I've decided that they happened because they needed to happen, right?
Yeah.
And that's a story that serves me and makes me make meaning and sense out of my life. I've also had moments that I really can't explain. Like, how do you
Yes.
get from Las Vegas to Portland with $30 when your plane should be 2 hours late and you don't have any money to pay the taxi driver? And, and like all of these synchronistic events just happen because I was like, well, there's no other option. So
Yeah.
let's go.
You have to make it happen.
Right. So yeah, I guess for me, what I try to do is really take the value judgment out of the experiences, right? And say, okay, there's the stuff where it's like, I consciously want this to happen. This would be amazing if it happened. And then there are the things that I know are going to happen because they're going to become a part of the fabric of what makes me me. And I might not actively choose them, but they are choosing me. And like, that's because I've decided I want to be the type of human who can show up in this way and have the fullness of experience to be able to connect with people or whatever. And I love just how you're helping people rewire things. So I guess lastly, I heard that you were working on some like super exciting research and development that's happening. Yeah, talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, one thing I will say too about the way of thinking that you have where you're saying, I'm creating my whole world, that is a tool that we teach. And that is a powerful tool to use, like to make you feel really empowered. So I feel like when someone hears that, oh, I created everything, but it makes them feel disempowered, don't use that as a tool. But you're using it in a powerful way. And I often use it in that powerful way too, of like, okay, this bad thing happened. How did I create this? And then what could I have done differently? Maybe had different boundaries or better boundaries or made different decisions or whatever that is to have had that been created differently or create a new future. And then it's so empowering because you're not giving your power away to outside circumstances or people. You're saying, I'm taking my power back. I'm choosing how my life is. And so I absolutely agree. Thinking in that way can be so empowering when you look at it from that perspective. So in terms of the research, yes. So, a few years ago when I started to get into personal development, everything like that, I would hear gurus on stage say, you can have everything you want. You can have it all. Da, da, da. And I was like, yeah, okay, easy for you to say. You don't know what I've been through. But after I started to learn the science behind manifestation and the universal laws and everything like that, it became solid proof for me, like, oh, I can actually have what it is that I want when I work alongside the universal laws. And there is all this science behind the fact that we can rewire our brain and rewire our neural pathways to think in a certain way, show up in a certain way, have better habitual behaviors that lead us towards success with ease. And there's also so much scientific data that's showing that our thoughts create reality and that our thoughts don't just exist within our brain, but they actually radiate from our brain, from our bodies, like with an electromagnetic signal, and can affect, reality, opportunities, people to help things work in our favor. So it's kind of like, I might think of you and then all of a sudden you text me, right? Mm-hmm. And we've all had that situation where we think of someone and they call or they text. Probably text because people don't call anymore, but
right. I mean, that's so 2000.
I know, right? And so we hired an amazing neuropsychologist in December 2020. I'm literally losing track of years. I had to ask my family member the other day, like, how old am I again? I don't even remember. But we hired this amazing neuropsychologist. And so she has been just doing a huge literature review of all of the literature that's out there that supports the work that we do. So we've already started refilming a lot of our course and we're integrating this in. Because here's the thing. A lot of times people say, oh, like manifestation isn't scientific or da da da. And a lot of people don't realize where science comes from or how science is formed. Science can be compiled and put together with funding. So of course there's a lot of science around pharmaceuticals because they're obviously going to pay to make the experiments so that they can say that their pharmaceuticals work or certain foods or whatever. But up to this point, as far as I know, there haven't been a lot of manifestation or mindset teachers who are funding science and research. And so I think that's the only reason why there isn't a lot of research behind it. But through the work that she's doing and the research she's doing, she's able to find, oh, this thing from this field supports what our work is. And this thing from this field supports what our work is. So she's currently doing a literature review. And then later this year, we're actually planning on doing our own research. So we'll use like wearable technology and everything like that to essentially measure people's success with our tools and then be able to provide tangible data for our coaches to share with their clients and for us to share with our community as well. So I'm really excited.
Yay! That is so exciting.
Yeah,
well,
I'm
and
super excited.
Yeah, and it makes me think about Joe Dispenza, who is, working with data. If you aren't familiar with Joe Dispenza, he's somebody who like healed a fracture that should not have healed with his mind. And so he's helped lots of people do the thing. One of the things that he's really pointed out is right now is the time of science, right? That's the language that people want to be able to communicate in to feel like it's valid, it's working, whatever. So he's like, well, let's speak that language then. And I love that you're showing up in that way because there are all of this wisdom that has been ancestral, that has been indigenous, being able to frame it in a way that works for our like contemporary minds, I think is so powerful in validating all of this stuff that, generations of people have known to be true on some level, but has been totally disregarded by science because they've been a group of white cis hetero dude bros that are profit motivated and had no interest in dealing with a lot of this. So that is so exciting.
We're so excited. And the thing is too, I feel like the people who need mindset work the most are typically the most skeptical, right?
Yes.
Most pessimistic. So like, I'm not going to believe that I can have everything I want unless I see the facts.
Yeah.
And so those are the people we actually need to help the most.
Yeah.
So when I'm like, okay, here's a research document. You can't have anything you want. Then it's like, there's nothing to rebuke it.
Yes, absolutely. My background was in psychology, and every once in a while, somebody will kind of like stick in something, and I'll just ask them if they know about RAS, the reticular activating system. It's this part of the brain that's like, if you bought a slug bug, all of a sudden you see slug bugs. Like that's literally a part of the brain's job is to make things prioritize information. And so it makes sense in so many ways that we are curating our experiences because we literally don't have the bandwidth to process all the data that's coming in.
Yeah.
So of course your stories are going to frame it. Of course what you're paying attention to is going to frame it. And I, of course, see silver Priuses everywhere because I have my grown-up car. It was the first car that I got that was like not about like looking cool. Was just about
I love it. I think it's so cool.
Now I see it everywhere. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you. Okay, are you ready for the G-Speed round?
Sure.
Only rules, you can't overthink it. So, okay. What was your early tween heartthrob?
I don't think I had one. I was more of like a girl. Like I liked like the Spice Girls and stuff.
Oh,
I was more of like into like girl bands. Yeah. My cousins would like Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, and I'm like, ew.
You're like, I'm hanging out with girl power over here.
Oh, you know who? I liked Shamar Moore. He was cute.
Who's that Shamar Moore?
Shamar Moore. He was in like Young and the Restless or something like that. He's really hot. Yeah.
Okay. Missed that boat. But I'll have to look it up later, see how your little kid taste was doing.
Google him. Yeah, it's worth it.
Okay. What was the first purchase that you made that like made you really feel in your bones like, yes, I have made it. I'm showing up abundantly. Like, fuck yeah.
My G-Wagon. I wanted it for like 10 years. So when I got it, I was like, yes.
I love that. Yeah. And just being able to, like, I've heard you talk about it in researching you for this episode too. Having something that continually creates the feeling and the reminder of how awesome you are and how grateful you are for what you've created is just like, yeah, money. Okay. What is the silliest thing we would, if we were like just to stop by at a random moment and you were in your silly situation, what's the silliest thing we would find you doing?
I'm always like dancing, like just weird dances, like weird interpretive dances, just like
Yeah, and all the
time.
fugly shapes. That's
Yeah.
me too. Where every once in a while you look over your shoulder.
I'll break into like a 10-minute interpretive dance, and my husband's like, "What the heck are you doing?"
See, I'll do that. I'll be alone, and every once in a while I'll look over my shoulder just to make sure nobody's watching because the movements are so ugly that I would even be embarrassed for like the people closest to me to see them. Yeah, 100%.
Oh my God, that's funny. You need to shake it out. You need to get the emotions out, right?
Right? Yes, somatic release. Okay, finish this sentence. I feel the most powerful when.
I feel the most powerful when I'm either speaking to a group or on a live stream, and I just feel like I've locked into something and just like the words start coming. And I'm like, I didn't even know I knew that, but I know it's helping someone right now. You just feel this like warm, tingly feeling, you know, you're tuned into something.
Yes. Now, do you remember it or do you kind of like black out?
A lot of time I black out. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm going to do a 5-minute live stream. And then how 45 minutes later am I just like,
Yeah.
I do not know. Yeah.
Yeah. I often rewatch my recordings, not because I'm like so excited to see myself on camera, because
Yes.
I have all sorts of issues like everybody else, but because I literally don't know what I've said. And then it's like, oh, that story came out of nowhere. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what is a quote from a movie or pop culture that your default brain goes to every now and then?
Can it be not from a movie or pop culture? I'm not really a movie buff. Okay. So my favorite quote is by Buckminster Fuller, and I might butcher it a little bit, but essentially he's saying, you can't create reality by fighting the existing reality. To create what you want, you have to make a new model that doesn't yet exist. So essentially it's just saying, like, if you want to create what you want, don't just fight the old, but create a new model in your mind of what you want and then trust that you're going there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've never been good at movies. When people are like, oh, did you see this actor? I'm like, I have no idea who you're talking about.
And then they end up telling you about the movie as if you've seen it. Like people do
Yeah.
that to me all the time. I'm like, nope, still haven't seen it, but I'm sure that was a great scene. Okay, second to last one. What is a question that in all your podcast interviews, all the way you're showing up, no one has asked you?
Maybe like what size I am? Because it's not relevant.
Yeah, I can see why.
I've been on a lot of podcasts. So like
Although I will say one of the things that has been so wonderful in following you is seeing how you've showed up fully. Nothing about the way that you've showed up from the outside has changed, even though your body has changed because you've created a human.
Yeah.
And I think there's no way you could have missed out on the stories and the programming about how women's bodies should be.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah. And the fact that you just are showing up in the same beautiful way is just really moving and inspiring because it's like, yeah, there's so many people, myself included, that like can get in our heads about how we need to be and what we need to look like and all of that. And it's just so wonderful the way that you do that.
That is a big part of my why. I remember a few years ago, I was at a training and there was a woman there who she inspired the heck out of me. Like she'd get up at not just to lose weight, but just because she's a healthy person. She'd get up at like 5 a.m, go to the gym, then do Pilates, then eat vegan, then come to the training, do all the work of the training. And then she also had, I think, 2 or 3 kids and she was pregnant.
Wow.
Doing all of this. She was 7 months pregnant. And she would ask me about how I was growing Yes Supply. And I was like, I honestly just like press the live stream button and talk. And I was like, you would do the same. Like, you're so inspiring. Like, you inspire me, you know, as a future mom. And she's like, oh, no, I can't do live streams. I'm pregnant. And I was like, you just wait. Because when I am pregnant and huge, I'm going to do all the live streams because I wanted her to do it. And I can only imagine how many people have amazing stories, tips and tricks and hacks and all those things. And then they're not showing up because they have a zit or they're a certain size or whatever. So I decided that I'm not ever going to let, my size affect that. And so I'm usually around like probably 130 to 140 pounds. And right now I'm around 195 pounds, but I love my body and I love my baby. And I'm really grateful that my body gave me my healthy baby. So
yes. Just like mic drop to all of that, because that is so, I'm just so grateful because I hear a lot of that from all, similar people who are just, and the thing that I always tell them too is like, do you want to learn from somebody who's fucking perfect? No. Like, I want to see somebody that I can relate to, that feels like a real full human to me. And so you're giving people permission to show up and to connect in a way that they wouldn't be able to do if, you were just like perfectly together, everything as it quote unquote should be. And then also you be a basic bitch because we don't need more of those in the world. And if you're listening to this, you are definitely not in that category. So don't even give me any lip. Okay, last one. What does it mean to be a bold bitch?
I think it's just being yourself, showing up, only competing with your past self, like not comparing yourself to other people, but just ask yourself, like, what can I do better today to live my life to the fullest and express myself in the way that I want to and, be me.
Yes. All the yeses. Okay. How can people connect? How can they be coached by somebody in the Yes Apply method? How can they become a coach? How can we do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are listening and you want to become a Yes Apply Method coach, you can head to yesapply.co/certified and see our upcoming dates and join the wait list. And then if you just want to connect, maybe you've heard one of the concepts we've talked about today, like NLP or EFT, and you want to go deeper, we have a ton of great, valuable YouTube videos where we're actually teaching things more in depth. And then you can also find me on Instagram at Yes Apply.
Yay. And if somebody is wanting to be coached in that methodology, but they're not, they have another career, is there a place that they can go to find people who are certified in this method?
Yeah. So right now we have a page, yesapply.co/single session shift. And so you can go there and you can sign up with one of our trainers for a coaching session. We're working on a directory, but I don't think it'll be ready until probably later in the year.
Okay, perfect. Yay, Reese Evans, you are fucking amazing. And I just am so glad because I love you just as much as I thought I would. And, I'm right, which also feels good. But thank you so much for sharing your time and just general amazingness with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
I know you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And do you know what would be amazing, since you are such a wonderful fucking human, would be if you just went to her Instagram and said so. Like, these little acts of taking a second out of your day to tell someone how much you appreciate them. I'm just really trying to lean into that. And I just think it's such a beautiful way that we can support her and just show that we got so much from this conversation. I hope that this week you lean in to the fabulosity that you are, that you just marinate in all of the goodness that you have to bring to the table, that you honor all of the magic and wisdom and power that you've accumulated and you don't shy away from it. I am just sending you the best vibes ever for this week, and I will see you back here in like 7 days. Bye. If you love this episode and the show, be sure to rate and review on iTunes and share it out in the world with a friend, family, frenemy, whatever feels good. You can follow us on Instagram at The Bold Bitch Podcast, and we're waiting for you at theboldbitch.com/mafia. See you next week.